Hello everyone, Santier here with Let's Make Astral Collision, part whatever this is, 14 I think? So there's been a good number of things that I've gotten done this past week, which I've been really happy about. Probably the most significant thing, it can be seen over here. And specifically, all of these are now actual places. So I finished filling in all of these various places of residence, which I'm really happy about. This song is really quiet, isn't it? Let's be careful with how much we raise that volume so it doesn't overpower my voice. But anyway, I forget exactly how far I got last time. Somewhere around... yes. I think I'd finished this one. And this one was an empty shell. So since then, I have filled in the rest of these. So let's just go ahead and go down. There's this guy, this very strange house. So this one is, if I go back to this map, this guy, with both of these, I realized one of the problems that I had is I kind of need to stretch them because this gap in between was a bit difficult to do. So normally what I like to do, and I think I mentioned this last time, is I like to basically count how wide it is. So for example, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wide and 3 tall. So I will then make this a 9x7 map, so I have space for everything. So that one is what, 2, 4? This guy right here. So you can see this has a floor space of 1, 2, 3 tall and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wide. So I've given it that floor space, and then there's extra 2, 1 for each side, and then 3 here for this wall and 1 here for this wall. So that's how I typically try to do it. But with these, because I needed to have this overhang area and this wall here, this wall takes up a bunch of space, so I had to stretch these two vertically. Sometimes it does that, and I'm not sure why. In order to accommodate room for it, made them a little bit bigger, but that's just how it goes. And then, of course, this last home here. We'll go look at them in-game in a moment. There's another thing that I did that's quite significant as well. Right here, I worked on this center part. So one of the things that you'll see is I have this center fountain area, but I also have these grassy medians that I have added. This does a couple of things. We'll see this in game, but these grassy medians help address one of the issues of getting a sense of where you're at in it. I do eventually... Oh, and this is going to be... I'll talk about this more in a bit, but this is going to be like the resurrection area. But you can see that I added this here, and this gives a bunch of space. I've also begun working on the palace area. So you can see sort of the entrance here. It goes along here in this corner, and then it's the upper middle along the side here. So this is in the upper left. So I've gotten this sort of overview area. I still want to get some stuff going on in these sides, but I'm not quite sure 100% what I'm going to put there. And I'm going to fill in these areas here with some garden. But that's kind of where things are at with this right now. I'm going to turn that down. So I've also started working on the inside of the palace. So this is the first floor. It's still very much so a work in progress. These are going to be filled out with rooms here, here, here. And there's going to be stairs over in these areas. There's a basement, which I've just begun, and the second floor, which is just blocked out right now. And of course, in all of these middle sections, I have added the strip. So that's a lot of the mapping work I've done, but I've also done another really important thing, which if I go over here, actually, this is going to be easiest to show over here. So if I go into here, you can see that there is now... if I go down this way, team 1, 2, and 3. So I went through all of the actors that have side view enemy sprites. Excuse me. And I apportioned them to teams. Now, I renamed those files. As I mentioned in the video yesterday briefly when I was going over enemies, they're right here. I renamed all of these in order to... designate what team they're a part of. For some reason, that renaming doesn't seem to have taken, and I'm not entirely sure why. Yeah, I don't know what what it is that caused that to not happen. There might be something that I need to change somewhere, some way in which these things are kind of stored internally. I don't know why stuff didn't automatically change, but I allocated all these folks to various teams, designated somebody as a team leader. And so these are all actors that have these sort of side view sprites that you can combat. So like I was saying, I have come in here. I went too far. And I've divvied those up into their own sheets, taking them off of the actor sheets. So you can see these actor sheets are looking a little sparse here as I've taken people off of them. And so, yeah, that's something that I've done. The first one is the team leader. And I've done the same thing with their faces. So if I go over here and go down to team, you can see team 1, team 2, and team 3. So I've gone through that process of figuring out all of that and allocating those. So that'll be useful for doing stuff with Kendra here, where I've been working. And then something else that I've done that's been very important is I figured out... So before I jump into that, the ability to resurrect your party members is going to be something that's really important. If a party member goes down in battle, you want some way of getting them back up. And that's a really tricky spot to figure out how to handle mechanically, because I don't want the Phoenix Down problem. The Phoenix Down problem, of course, is the problem of if Phoenix Down exists, why do people, die? Right, so I don't entirely know how Final Fantasy handles the lore behind Phoenix Downs, but this is a fundamental problem you see in a lot of things. Guild Wars 1 has this problem in factions in particular. For example, so very early on in the Guild Wars faction storyline, your party gets killed, and then for some reason they can't just resurrect at a resurrection shrine, which is strange and unusual. But basically the lore of handling player death is often inconsistent or difficult to handle in games effectively. So I wanted to figure out, okay, how am I handling the lore of how you can resurrect the player? Now, it's pretty straightforward with skills. There is a resurrect skill, for example. There's a couple of resurrect skills now. The player characters are these prophets that are to some extent pseudo-immortal. If they die, they can be resuscitated. And from death, they can be resurrected. They've already died once, and they are kind of higher level beings to some extent. They're still like the base species that they were, but they have some greater capabilities, some greater knowledge, things like that. And one of these greater capabilities is the ability to be resurrected from death. This is not something that ordinarily happens, but that presents a conundrum. Only so many characters get resurrection abilities. Not every class gets access to them. The Whammo gets access to resurrect with Get Up, I think. And there's a couple of these casting professions. The Telenergist can use resurrect. There's one of these that gets super early. Yeah, right here. The Sorcerer gets resurrect at level 2. And there's one other one that gets resurrect. Yeah, right here. The Druid gets resurrect at level 19. But most of these professions, and the Sage can also use resurrect because the Sage gets all of those normal skills. I forget what level the Sage gets resurrect at, though. Yeah, 30. So anyway, maybe a third, 40% of these characters are, maybe even half, but certainly not all of them are going to be able to resurrect. And the only way that I could guarantee that you have at least one resurrection skill in your party is to have every character but one able to use resurrect. It's just untenable. And so the obvious solution to that is to have a resurrection item. But then I have to explain why a resurrection item works and all that sort of stuff. And more accurately, why it doesn't work. This is what I mean by the Phoenix Down problem. If I can resurrect party members, then why can't I resurrect non-party members? Right, if there's an item that I can use to resurrect party members, logically that item should also be able to resurrect anyone. And if not, what's the contrived reason? So I figured out what my contrived reason is. You get a special item called a Resurrection Signet. Yes, I'm just cribbing the name from Guild Wars. And this has charges. The Res Sig charge, which is just an item that you can use. that recovers the HP, MP, and basically resurrects a party member fully. It has a fairly quick activation speed. I'm going to use this a little bit like Estus, in that you only get so many. And so there is a common event here, refill the res sig, that I can call that will basically say, okay, it enters into a loop and says, okay, how many resurrection signet charges do you have? If you have fewer resurrection signet charges than the total number of charges you're allowed to have, then we give you another charge. Otherwise, in other words, if you have an equal number, then we stop incrementing it, and we just put some text that the resurrection signet has been recharged. Now, I have a little bit of a design conundrum for how I want to handle these charges in terms of quantity. My initial plan of action when I was thinking about this, and let me go back to the center, is the first time. So you basically start off with one charge for your resurrection signet, and whenever you interact with one of these for the first time, you get sort of a poem bit from it, which I've talked about a little bit in the Saturday videos, and then I also will give you an additional charge to your resurrection signet. And then whenever you interact with one of these, you set your respawn point and refill all of your resurrection charges. There's a problem with this method, though, which is that it starts off the game with a low number of resurrection signets and ends the game with a high number of them, which can potentially skew difficulty as you're going on. So, generally speaking, you want the game to get a bit harder the further it goes, and giving the player more resources and more powerful resources is a way of, like, you have to compensate for that in your design, and I don't want to have to design a game that kills the player a bunch in order to burn through the resurrection signet charges. The other issue that I have is it makes the start of the game a bit more unforgiving in terms of being able to resurrect your party members, which I don't necessarily want, because that's a time when you're learning the game and I want it to be a bit more forgiving. So the other conundrum that I have is, if I want to try to compensate, in other words, not have you get too many resurrection signets, I have to severely limit the number of these resurrection shrines I have, or these respawn points that I have. Now, I could theoretically use these shorter ones as like mini respawn points that maybe don't give you an additional charge, but I don't really like that idea, although that's definitely one that I can think about having. The other sort of conundrum that I have is if you are... So the idea of getting access to more, say, Estus Flask shards as you go through the game. So for example, in Dark Souls 2 and 3, you have a couple of ways of upgrading your Estus. You have quantity and quality. And so the quantity upgrade gives you access to more Estus Flasks. Usually it's an Estus Flask shard. And the quality one makes the Estus Flasks more powerful. Now, I can't really go more powerful than you get a full resurrection, full health, full MP. The only thing I could do on top of that is to give you a bunch of TP as well, and I'm not planning on doing that. So I could give you more quantity, but again, that has, like I discussed the issues that I have with that design-wise earlier, where if I do that, then I effectively make the game sort of easier as you're going in a way that I might not want. So what I'm leaning towards, honestly, is just giving you a set number of charges, I don't know, 4 or something, and just having it be, okay, you get 4 charges. That's it. That might be the direction I go in. I might have... I could use these shorter ones here, actually, as the way to get additional charges, and just have, like, maybe an additional 4 out in the world somewhere. That might be a good reward for doing certain side quest type things. And I think I might lean that direction, as I've kind of talked through it a bit. Because I don't want to have to limit how many of these I place. I want to place them fairly liberally around the world, so that way you have a lot of respawn points. And if you game over, you're not having to make huge treks around. So I want to be fairly generous with how many of these I make. So I think I might go with a solution where I like use these, for example, to give you like an additional few copies. Does that all make sense, I hope, as I've kind of worked through a lot of my logic there and a lot of things I'm trying to accomplish with this system. Anyway, I need to add those into the game at some point here. But for now, let's go ahead and take a moment to just explore a little bit. So let's get this guy going, and I can kind of show you how things look. Let me stop that music for this music. Man, this game just plays stuff so loud. So here we are at the western gate. This leads up to the palace area. I haven't put in the transition for that yet. I'll be getting to that later, but that's not the interesting part. So here you can see one of the important functions of the median is it is enough distance that like you can't get lost in the middle of things. Oh. Looks like it's become morning. So I obviously need to add transition code to these areas. Now it's day. I might adjust some of the duration for some of those things. But you can see that like going back and forth, it doesn't cause you to get lost in a screen like that. And I do want to add stuff along it that can be kind of landmarky. But I want to figure out how I'm going to approach doing that. So here's our central square. Again, this doesn't do anything yet, but it will. And we can come over here and enter these various houses. So here we have a house. I'll eventually flush these out with NPCs and stuff like that, but I mean, it's not terribly different from the other screen, but you kind of get a feel for how all of these things are connected up, and I needed to make sure all the connections worked and stuff like that. This statue, by the way, I'm using as kind of the statue to sort of celebrate heroes, so it's going to be a somewhat significant one in this. Who's at the lead of my party? Sir Lionel's at the lead of my party. So we can see these various houses. Yeah, I think I went in that one already. This, I think, is the last one that we had seen. And right here is this guy. And then this weird one. Which, this is one of those things, is the door area gives a broader feel than I necessarily entirely like. But, whoops, I walked too far. Anyway, that's how some of this stuff is looking right now. And I need to add musical cues to some of these areas. So yeah, and then this is the entrance to the palace that I will be filling out later. So anyway, that's going to go ahead and wrap things up for me. I have kind of gone over the various things that I have done. And don't forget to check out some of the Saturday videos if you want to see some more of the lore, backstory, creation process. Hopefully it's interesting for people. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. So thank you for watching, and until next time, everyone, take care and goodbye.